Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Recently I made a podcast with Ryan from Intelligent Gaming, where we talk about the progress of DirectX 12 transition to Vulkan, Cyberpunk, what is the better choice AMD or Nvidia on Linux, a bit about Arch Linux, and recommended resources for learning more about Linux. So today's video is a bit different, but I hope you keep enjoying it, and please don't forget to check out Ryan's channel, he has some great videos. But yeah, that's about it, I'll see you in the next one.
Hello everyone and welcome to another podcast on this channel. This time I'm joined by Joe, but you might know him better as Bero, who is a fellow content creator that focuses on benchmarking games, distributions, and occasionally producing easy to follow tutorials on, shall we say, the more technical aspects of gaming on Linux. Either way, good to have you joining me today.
Hello everyone, pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So for people that are not familiar with yourself and your particular content, do you want to give us a quick rundown of what your channel's all about and what first got you into Linux?
Yeah, so my channel, I started mainly Windows games on Linux, and I do benchmark them. So I compare them, how they run on Linux and how they run on Windows. And I started my channel like a year ago. I started to care about Linux 5 years ago, roughly, when I got a kind of older laptop and Windows was very slow on it. So I was just looking around, okay, how can I boost the performance on my laptop? So I did a lot of distro hopping. I tried everything like Ubuntu Mate, Linux Mint, Manjaro, Arco Linux, all those things. And back then I stuck with Solus. Version number was 3.0 back then. And I didn't have a gaming PC at that time. So we're talking about like 5 years ago. And I built a gaming PC. I bought a budget one. So I had a Xeon 3440 with second generation Xeon CPU from Intel with the RX 580. And I installed Solus. So I started to play games, mainly Witcher 3. Back then Witcher 3 was very good. It's still good. And roughly a year ago, lockdown happened. I had a bunch of free time. I started to do more and more YouTube videos, and here we are.
So is there any particular genre of games that you prefer to play over others?
Yeah, I like single player games. I like open world games. So I'm not really a multiplayer guy. Sometimes I play Overwatch, but I really like Diablo. Actually, Diablo 2 was my first game I bought, and I built a gaming PC back then. I was just a kid. I had a AMD Barton 2500, as I remember, with the Nvidia FX 5200 Ancient, and I was playing mainly Diablo. I bought Diablo 3. I built a new PC, and thanks to Techia City, I started to build gaming PCs, second part of 2019, and I did budget gaming PCs mainly, and I sold like 20 of them. Actually, my first YouTube video, if you look at my channel, a PC built with kind of popular games like Fortnite, Apex Legends, Overwatch, how they run on that PC, because a lot of people were asking, okay, what's the Fortnite performance on that resolution, this resolution? So I was like, okay, let's do a YouTube channel, and I started to actually upload just PC builds with few games on it. Back to the original topic, as I said, single player games, I like Witcher 3, I think one of the best. Came out 2016, looks amazing still. I like, for example, Metro Exodus, Doom Eternal is pretty good, and Diablo is my top game.
Well, they've got Diablo 2, the remaster in it, aren't they? Sometime in the future. So I've got that on my to-buy list. So yeah, again, that's something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, actually, Diablo 2 will use the Diablo 4 engine, the brand new engine, what they're going to have under Diablo 4. More than likely DX12, but we will see how it runs on Linux.
Well, I mean, hopefully by that point, the translation side of things will be a lot more developed and there'll be less of an overhead, which is actually one of the topics we're probably going to talk about later on.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I suppose we could talk about it now, really. As many as you obviously listen to this podcast, you're probably aware that the way it works when you're playing Windows-developed games on Linux, there's a couple of key components involved. The first one is you've got your compatibility layer, which is your WIME. You've got your DXVK, which is your translation technology, which allows you to basically play something that's built using DirectX 9, 10, and 11. Now, this is proprietary to Microsoft. It's their graphic API. But what it does is it translates it to a more cross-platform API, which is supported on Linux, and that's what Vulkan is. You've also got other things like eSync and the successor to eSync, which is FSync. And the idea behind that is to basically lower the overhead because, you're not playing this natively. There's always going to be some form of overhead. Obviously, it depends on your system and how intensive the game is itself. Now, you've also got VK3D. Now, that handles your translation from DirectX 12 to Vulkan. Now, unfortunately, the original developer of that, it was a guy called Joseph Kusia. He actually passed away a couple of years back, but Valve has actually taken up the mantle on that, and they're the ones now developing that technology. Now, in my experience, I found that DXVK is, absolutely brilliant. I don't see any performance loss from playing something on my Linux distribution compared to playing it natively on Windows. Now, when it comes to DirectX 12, it's not that great in my experience. I tend to find it is completely night and day. So, I mean, I don't know what your experience is, Joe. I mean, you obviously play quite a lot of DirectX 12 games. What have you found when you're playing games?
You're absolutely right there. So DXVK, in my opinion, as well, is very mature. To be honest, if a DX11 title comes out, we have a 99% chance if we are run fine just Linux using the DXVK stuff. But DX12 is a low-level API, so much more complicated. I think that's the main issue with Linux right now. In my opinion, it's a bigger issue than the anti-cheat stuff, because this year and end of last year, almost every single game came out with DX12. It's just a headache sometimes. For example, Horizon Zero Dawn is just a mess. So it came out, it runs kind of fine on lower resolution on a very powerful hardware. So for example, I did a video back then. Yeah, the game being patched up and for example, dynamic resolution is working now. But back then I had to lower my resolution. I was using VK Basalt to, just bit sharpen the image, very low resolution. It's below 1080p as I remember correctly. And still the game just doesn't use the hardware. So my GPU utilization is like 50% as a CPU, and I have pretty beefy GPU and hardware. It could be better. We all know the hardware prices are ridiculous in this year and end of last year. But there is the other side of the coin, Cyberpunk, or we can name Devil May Cry. Actually, Devil May Cry, I think if you install it, it straight away uses DX12, but you can go to config file and change it to DX11, so DXVK. And still, DX12 works fine, but there is a performance loss compared to DX11. But the good thing, if the studio or the developers think about Linux. So for example, Cyberpunk when came out, Valve got a copy from CDPR, and a few hours before the actual launch, Valve could prepare the game. A new Proton version came out, which supported Cyberpunk, so we could play it, which is a very good thing because Cyberpunk was the most hyped game in this decade. And yeah, we had sound issues. There were glitches. We don't know it was the game engine or the game or the X layers, what we need to use. There was audio issues, but because Valve had time to prepare and therefore they could push out the fixes pretty fast. Let's say 2 days later, we had the audio fix patch, which was in the Proton experimental version. It's pretty good if a developer literally just give a copy to Valve. Okay, here you go, guys. Can you prepare it? Because yeah, the market share is pretty small. It's still a few million people playing on Linux. We all hope the market will be bigger, but in my opinion, DX12 will be the issue on Linux, not the anti-cheat.
Yeah, because I mean the anti-cheat games, a lot of them are quite legacy nowadays, so they probably are still using something like DirectX 11. So even if one day the anti-cheats resolve, brilliant. Now I can play these games, but I've still got all these brand new ones, which I've got to use an alternative solution. I mean, you could do something like GeForce Now if it's available, or you could, like I do. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest with you. We use the example of Horizon Zero Dawn. If I run it on Linux, it's a slideshow, and I don't exactly have the oldest graphics card. I've got a GTX 1080, but if I play it on Windows, I get a solid 1080p, 60 FPS consistently on the high settings.
Yeah.
Even if I set Linux on the lowest resolution, lowest settings, it still runs like a slideshow.
So that's a big headache. So I have the RX 5700. I played it on Windows first few hours of the game, and it runs fine. Usually I play single player games on my TV. So I have my monitor hooked up to my video card and the TV. I just play it on my TV. So usually I target 1800p. 4K with my card is not possible. So 1800p, bit lower graphical settings, and it's perfectly fine on Windows. But on Linux, even the input lag, it's just crazy. So I tried it a few days ago. You press jump, there is a 1 or 2 second delay, like literally seconds. I was like, okay, let's try another Proton version. Let's try the Glorious Agro, but the result is always the same.
Yeah, there's definitely some work that needs to be done on that. But like you said, it doesn't seem to be consistent across the board, because you mentioned that Cyberpunk, which again is another DirectX 12 game, well, at least according to your most recent video, it seems to run pretty well. I mean, yeah, let's be honest, this game did have a less than stellar launch. But as you mentioned before, it technically did have day one support on Linux. Technically, I say that because the caveat, of course, is you have to be on AMD and you have to be running the latest Mesa drivers.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, it's not just click and play. We have ProtonDB, which is a very, very, very handy website. If you're planning to play on Linux, or if you are a Linux gamer and you never heard about that, I doubt it. ProtonDB. Like if I stuck with the game, I just go to ProtonDB, I can find a solution. But Cyberpunk, actually, under my latest video, I got some comments. Okay, can you do a Linux vs Windows side by side? First of all, it's not that easy because it's an open world game. NPCs are walking around, cars are coming and going. It's not easy to do side by side exactly the same. I try, but I played it on Windows after my video, and it's very, very, very similar. Maybe we talk about 5 FPS more on Windows. So it's very close. We're getting there, but I think it doesn't work on Nvidia cards and it works on AMD cards, but you need the latest stuff.
Yeah, which is always the thing with AMD. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people say AMD is better because everything's bundled either in the kernel or the repositories. Yeah, that's true to a certain extent, but it also depends on what distribution you're using. I mean, something like maybe Arch-based would probably be an example of, yes, there's very little you need to do, but if you're using like the vast majority of the users out there, something like Ubuntu, you still need to install some libraries manually.
Yeah.
And there's obviously something like Pop! OS, which tries to streamline that particular process, but ultimately there are going to still be some things you need to do as an end user. Whereas on the other side, if you've got Nvidia rather, it's the same as what people will be used to in Windows. You download a drive and you install it, and that's it.
Yeah, really. Absolutely.
I mean, you've got experience of both sides of this because I believe you used Nvidia before you actually switched to AMD.
Yeah, actually, when I said 1 year ago, I started in April. I had a GTX 1070. I started with Pop! OS because I saw the ISO. Okay, it's NVIDIA ready. Let's install it. No headache. It runs fine. I would say if you are a new user, you want to try Linux and you have an NVIDIA card, just install Pop! OS. Very easy to use. You open the store. I think you have a how to set up Pop! OS for gaming. I have a video how to set up Pop! OS for gaming. It's very easy. You don't have to go to the terminal. Literally just go to the software center, install Steam, install Lutris. It will install automatically the wine stuff, the game mode, and you just use it and it just runs fine. NVIDIA has the good stuff in the beta drivers or the latest drivers. Again, you need PPAs, which is the same story with AMD. So if you want the latest Mesa on Ubuntu and you have an AMD card, you need PPA. After that card, I switched to AMD and then really missed the NVENC encoder because AMD doesn't have a good encoder. So there is the AMF stuff, which doesn't, so you cannot select it in OBS if you want to record something or if you want to edit a video. Even FFmpeg just got it recently and you have to compile it yourself with AMF enabled. So with AMD card, you have 3 drivers on Linux. So you have an unofficial open source, official open source, and you have the AMD GPU Pro driver. So we have the Radvi, which is the Mesa, which comes out of the box 99% of the time. You can download the AMD VLK driver, which is the official AMD open source driver. And you can have the AMD GPU Pro. Possible to install it on Manjaro, any Arch-based distro via AUR or AI. Like I'm using the Mesa driver and I'm using the AMD GPU driver at the same time. So use OBS only with the AMD GPU driver, and AMF works just fine, but not as good as NVENC. If you have an NVIDIA card and if you do videos streaming, you have NVENC, which is a big plus, and that's what I don't like on my AMD card.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I always submit, whenever people ask the questions like, oh, which one should I go with? I said, well, first of all, choose something that's within your price range. And it ultimately depends what you're going to be doing in your system. If you just purely want to play games, you've no interest at all at recorded footage, streaming, or anything like that, then fair enough, go with AMD. But if you do want to stream and you want to record as well as play games, stick with NVIDIA. And yes, they're not the devil just because they've got a proprietary driver. The proprietary driver does work. Yeah, so, and like you said, NVENC is something that I use all the time for record all my footage. It's what I use for rendering, and it really does make a difference.
Yeah, so even the performance is just fine. It's very on par with Windows. So actually my most popular video, which in my opinion, not the best video, but the most popular video when I compare Pop! OS to Windows, I was using the GTX 1070. And yeah, a bit slower. But to be honest, if I turn off the FPS counter and the top left right corner, and I just tell you, okay, look at the screen and decide, just pick which one is Windows, which one is Linux, I doubt you can get it all the time 100% right. because they are so close. There are no graphical glitches. There's not like the texture is different on Linux compared to Windows. They are very, very similar on on an Nvidia card because you get the Nvidia driver from Nvidia. Here are a few features are missing, like DLSS, ray tracing, input lag stuff, which reduces the input lag in the viewer driver. Those features are missing. But performance-wise, if you don't have FPS counter on the screen, it's very hard to spot a difference.
I mean, the one thing I did notice, because as I mentioned before, I've got an Nvidia GPU, is screen tearing. Now, that only occurs if I turn off the compositor. If I leave the compositor on, I don't see any screen tearing at all. So, I tend to get mixed information about this. So I don't know if this is still the same case with AMD. So say if you're using, I don't know, a desktop environment such as KDE, for example, they use KWin.
Mm-hmm.
If you full screen an application like a game or a video, then at that point the compositor does get disabled. So you will incur some screen tearing. Now,
true.
In Nvidia, because there's actually a utility built in, it's just called Xserver utility. You can enable what's known as false composition pipeline, which is basically just another name for vsync, which is what's on default in Windows, which is why you do it. Yeah, by the way, if you ever want to see this in action, disable vsync on Windows and you'll see tearing across the board. Actually, don't do that. It looks terrible. But yeah, it's something you take for granted. You don't realize it's there before. I mean, you can actually test it. If you remove the NVIDIA driver, it'll default to whatever Microsoft's basic driver is. And yet you have screen tearing across the board everywhere. But yeah. So I suppose my question, Joe, is there a similar sort of thing that happens on AMD?
No, you can add in the XR config file, I think it's 20-AMD config. You can add the tiering free option.
Okay.
But I never added that because I don't have an issue. I had issue with NVIDIA before I went to the setting compositor. I think I set it to crisp and I selected the OpenGL, the latest one, I think 3.1 in the drop-down menu. But it's well known on Plasma. With NVIDIA, it can be issue. It's literally just two settings and that's it. But AMD, I didn't have any screen tearing. I use Firefox. I have web render enabled. No issue there. And I don't have any issue. Now I use GNOME because I had flickering screen with my TV and monitor setup, so dual screen setup on the latest Plasma. But with GNOME, I don't have any issue. So GNOME turns off the compositor when it's a full screen application. I'm very happy with AMD as well, but I was very happy with NVIDIA. So I didn't have any issue. I was using it. As I said, NVENC, that's what I miss.
Okay, fair enough then. So, I mean, we've discussed this before, but Stadia, which is Google's now foray into cloud gaming, it's my understanding that it uses Vulkan for most, if not all, of the titles. So the idea is that in theory, if they ever get ported, they should work out the box on Linux with no performance hits. I mean, do you think that's ever going to be something that would happen? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Hopefully. So Stadia is actually very young. It's only 1 year old. It came out like a year ago. So the Google servers runs on Linux. As I know, they use Vulkan for games. So for example, if you look at Vulkan games on Linux, they are absolutely fine. So Doom Eternal, Red Dead Redemption 2, perfectly fine with Vulkan. Yeah, it wasn't working for a while because the game launcher. I can name a Vulkan game which runs on Windows and doesn't run on Linux. Maybe a subscriber will correct me in the comment section. Stadia uses Vulkan. So for example, Cyberpunk is out there. Cyberpunk runs fine on Stadia, uses Vulkan. So there is one question why they didn't enable it. So why is it not an option? So okay, I want to use DX12 or I want to use Vulkan like in Red Dead Redemption 2. But as I said, Stadia is new. It's still young, 1 year old. And there is a Metro Exodus, which coming out on the 14th of April. And they coming out with the next gen patch, do a port for Mac and Linux. So actually, which is a very good news in my opinion, because it's an amazing game. I finished the game, very, very good game. Has a platinum rating of ProtonDB. No news about that, but I can guarantee that it will use Vulkan. And I have a feeling it will use some sort of Stadia codes. And that would be key. So if Metro Exodus would be great and it runs fine on Linux and people actually buying it, that would be the first good thing. That's the future if it works. So of course, there's a lot of ifs. The first step would be Metro Exodus.
I see, yeah. So I mean, what it really comes down to is if these developers decide to switch to Vulkan over DirectX, then we're basically halfway there, aren't we? The only thing that would really be left would be anti-cheat, which I think for certain ones, especially like the kernel level ones, such as your BattleEye and your easy anti-cheats, unless something dramatically changes, I don't think that would be something that's, well, I mean, easy anti-cheat probably will work sometime in the future, but I doubt battle hours. I mean, if you play Windows 10 in a VM, battle hour blocks you anyway. You have to have a physical copy, so not a virtualized copy of Windows 10 in order to play that game.
Yeah,
which is a shame, really. I mean, you've also got the one that you Valorant. I can never say
Valorant.
that game. That's Valorant. That's right. Yeah, that uses another form of kernel level anti-cheat.
You brought it up Valorant. So Valorant coming from the Riot studio, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and they have LoL, League of Legends, one of the most popular mobile game, and they have Valorant, which is pretty new.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, they said on Twitter, "Oh, guys, so the game won't work on Linux. You just go play Dota." So I think this mentality is wrong. So the studio has to do just a small step, like we were talking about earlier, CDPI. Just literally send the code to Valve, and you don't have to do anything, because Valve did the rest. But when a studio like literally doesn't care about Linux at all, that's the wrong mentality.
I mean, the other thing about when you're talking about kernel level anti-cheats is that with it being kernel level, it would have to be included, and people would take exception to that.
There were rumors with kernel 5.11 we'll get some good things with anti-cheat, and actually, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a Vine version which had the anti-cheat patch, and there were videos actually online on Reddit. People are playing Fortnite, Destiny 2, but whenever easy anti-cheat get patched, then that's it. So that Vine version is outdated. You need to keep continuously monitor it, patch it. I would say the DXVK developers and VKD 3D developers, they have to go step by step. And in my opinion, they concentrating mainly on DX12, because that doesn't work. So the game might work, whichever uses anti-cheat, but it doesn't work because of the anti-cheat, not because of the DX11 or DXVK.
Yeah, I mean, the 5.11 kernel, that was to do more with DRM rather than anti-cheat. I don't know why that rumor started, but it was clarified several times. It had absolutely nothing to do with anti-cheat yet. Well, this is the internet, isn't it? So people seem to spread that around. Oh, yeah, it's suddenly going to start working. No, it didn't. It was to do with DRM, digital right management, nothing at all to do with anti-cheat. But yeah, like I said, people, just ignored that. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, my granddad used to say. So that's one of the things.
Yeah.
Actually, so I suppose something completely different. Arch Linux, have you ever used that before in the past? I suppose you might have done when you first started out.
I used Arch Linux. I didn't have the patience to install Arch Linux and use the wiki and sit down for 1 or 2 hours and just do everything. I didn't have the patience and time. So I was using Arch Linux. When it came out, I think has a Belgian developer, and they have their website as well. So if you want to look it up, archlinux.com, I believe. And that actually it's a graphical interface where you can do the basic installation, but when you're done with the installation, restart, and you have just command line. And I was using Arch Linux with Ubuntu Mate. I like Ubuntu Mate. It's kind of a classic version of the GTK2, I believe. And I was using it. It's fine. And actually, when I was distro hopping, I was kind of scared. I was like, Arch, okay, it's a lot of commands and terminal and stuff. I was using Ubuntu Mate, but after I was like, okay, let's learn. And I was using Arch Linux for a while, after Manjaro as well. But as I said, I stuck with Solus. I think the idea is good. I always recommend Arch Linux to people, whoever can fix their system. Yeah,
I'd say it's designed for people that, I don't want to say have too much time, but I mean, it even clearly states, if you're expecting a system to be all set and ready for you, then Arch Linux is not for you. It clearly says that on their website, which is fair enough. The reason I mentioned it is they've actually now included a script that will actually run through the majority of the setup process, and it is just literally a matter of selecting, what file system do you want to format to, what disk you want to format, what desktop environment, and obviously choose your locale, your mirrors, etc. But rather than do that manually by following the wiki, you basically choose from numbers 1 to 9, and then it'll go through, reboot your system, and that's it. You've got your Arch at that point. It's really good, actually. I've tried it several times, and it works. In fact, I've actually produced I haven't produced it. I've written the script for a video, so which bit of luck should be recording end of this week. But yeah, it's literally everything's set up in 10 minutes. It's really good.
I
It basically
definitely will watch that video because it sounds pretty cool.
it popped up one day. I think it was on Phoronix, actually, the website that I heard about it. I thought, no, there can't be something like that because there are some GUI tools out there. You've got the one I used before was a Zen installer, which I think was based on an old distribution called Revenge Linux. Don't know why it was called Revenge Linux, but that's what I previously used, and I have done the old school version. It took forever, and I thought, I got to the end of it. I thought, really, do I want to be doing this all the time?
I was using Zen installer as well, and it takes forever to install. I was installing Plasma with that on my laptop, and it's just so slow. I think it's just crashed once, so it's not that reliable. I think the developer hasn't updated the ISO in a while, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, that's right. Well, like I said, I mean, I saw this news article. I thought, I'll give that a try myself. Tried it in a VM to start with, and yeah, sure enough, ran through, popped out my installation media, and there you go. I was in Arch. And I can say, by the way, I use Arch, even though I don't use Kubuntu, but it's a badge of honor, isn't it? I mean, what do you use at the moment? Is it Manjaro you use at the moment?
Manjaro, yeah. I switched from KD to GNOME. As I mentioned earlier, I had flickering screens, but I was using KD and Manjaro. Manjaro is perfectly fine for me because it's based on Arch. They keep the packages a bit longer. I'm on the testing branch, so I have already the Mesa 21. I use GNOME. I don't have issue with GNOME. I know GNOME is kind of another other question, Plasma or GNOME or anything else and GNOME, but I'm fine with GNOME. It does the job. I think the dual monitor setup is better than KD, but I really like KD. KD is very nice. Actually, I heard that KD maybe in the future they will switch to they use OpenCL or OpenGL. Which one they use?
It's OpenGL, I think they use, yeah.
GL, yeah, and they want to use Vulkan instead of OpenGL, which might be a very, very good thing.
Another thing I suppose we could talk to is when you first started using Linux, was there any particular resources you used or anything you'd recommend to new users? Like YouTube channels, websites, forums, that kind of thing. Anything you'd recommend?
Yeah, so your channel, start with you.
What a great plug.
you have good videos. You can check my videos as well, but your one is better. I really like DustGeek. DustGeek had a 30 days challenge when he was a hardcore Windows user and he switched over to Linux, and he has a 30 days challenge. So he recorded every single day. That's a very good video. It's 30 videos, of course. Reddit is very good, but sometimes you have to be careful at it because there are a lot of trolls. And Phoronix, you mentioned earlier, gaming on Linux. Oh my God, Ubuntu is also good. They have some useful articles.
Yeah, there's one that I've started reading recently. It's called 9 to 5 Linux. It's basically 9to5linux.com. They're pretty good. In fact, I think it was one of my recommended ones because on my Android phone, I use Google Chrome. Yeah, all right, shoot me. But, when you open up a new tab, it'll come with suggested stories, and a lot of them from that website's been recommended, and they're pretty good, to be fair.
Yeah, I have to look that up.
Yeah, they're always good for like news articles, that kind of thing. The one I don't really like is Boiling Steam. I don't think they're a very good website, if I'm perfectly honest. Their articles are a lot fluff.
Yeah, I saw their article about Dirt 5. I really like Dirt. I'm a huge racing game fan, and Dirt Rally. I really like Dirt Rally, and I think the best is Dirt 3 still. It's pretty old, but it's a very, very good game. And I own Dirt 5, but it doesn't run on Linux yet. But I saw on their website there is a way to play it on Nvidia card. So there is the other side of the coin. Cyberpunk works on AMD only, it doesn't work well or at all on Nvidia. But Dirt 5 runs on Nvidia card, doesn't run on AMD.
Yeah,
which is a bit weird. I tried it, and with the latest Proton, which came out recently, 6.3, I think they did a hotfix just yesterday.
That's right. Yeah.
You can go to the menu, so it runs fine. So I have Mango Hut straight away when the game launches. You have the Codemaster logo and stuff. You have the nice 100 something FPS while you're in the menus and stuff. The frame time is nice and smooth, but when you start the game, 1 or 2 FPS, it's ridiculous. So hopefully we'll get there because I want to play that game. And I was very happy when I saw the new Proton. Okay, let's give it a try. And I saw okay, menu and everything works fine. I can change my graphics settings, resolution, and everything just smooth. But when you launch the game, it's just miserable.
Is it a
So
DirectX 12 game then?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, there we
He
go.
uses ray tracing. It's a DX12 title. Sadly, as I said earlier, that would be the issue. So as I said, hopefully it will work because I played it actually on Windows because I already own it. So I wanted to play it. And it runs fine. It's okay. It has dynamic resolution, which in my opinion works pretty cool. And actually, dynamic resolution and DLSS, we haven't talked about that, but that's also a feature which is missing from Linux. And I think DLSS works only on DX12 titles. It doesn't work with DX11. It might work with Vulkan titles like Youngblood, I think. And hopefully AMD is coming out with their solution will be Fidelity X Super Resolution. They said so. Rumors are saying that stuff will be open source and will work on every card. So it doesn't matter it's an AMD card, Nvidia card, or the upcoming Intel graphic cards. Hopefully it will work because that would be a game changer. If it's open source, it should run fine on Linux. So I'm looking forward actually to the super resolution announcement. But if I would have an Nvidia card, second generation or the third one, the new one, that's the feature I would miss, the DLSS, because I think it's pretty cool and can give you a huge performance boost. And visually, you can't even spot the difference. Maybe you can if you look close. So that's a feature which hopefully will be available.
Yeah, definitely. I know you mentioned about Wolfenstein Youngblood. I think that's more to do with ray tracing, where I think at the moment there's only actually 3 games that officially support ray tracing. I can't remember what the third game is. I know one's Quake 2, I think it is. It's one of the Quake games. Then there's the Wolfenstein game.
Quake 2.
That's right. I think there's a third game as well, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. You probably got people screaming. Yeah, yes. Oh, that's right. Yes, Control recently, isn't it?
Yeah, but the ray tracing without DLSS or something similar like super resolution, it's very, very heavy on the GPU. They go in hand. That actually is another YouTube channel which is recommended, Flightless Mongo. He does a lot of benchmark video as well. And he did test Youngblood with ray tracing and it does work. As I remember, it's very similar to the Windows performance. I don't know what's your thoughts about ray tracing. It's nice, but I wouldn't.
Well, I have a GPU that doesn't support it, so I've got no comment on that.
Yeah, my one doesn't support it either. But I might turn it on if I can buy a RX 6800 or XT. That's what I really keen to get. But it's just ridiculous to pay that amount of money. Even if you want to pay £1,000 euros, you can't even get it because it's sold out everywhere.
I was going to say, of course, if anyone wants to donate to this channel, then yeah, go ahead. I'll put it to good use.
Yeah, it would be nice if someone just sends 3090 or a 16900 XT and here you go, just have a look how these cars can run on Linux, Manjaro, what have you, and you can compare them. That would be nice.
Yeah, definitely. I'll do it for science, not for my own personal amusement. Yeah, I mean, look, even if you send me a 3060 Ti, I'm not going to complain and say, no, send it back. In fact, that's what I'm actually looking forward to getting. But again,
that's a very good card on paper. And on benchmarks, what I saw, 3060 Ti would be very popular if the prices will go back to normal. Who knows when?
Exactly, yeah. It's daft. It's like I was considering upgrading to a 2080 or that particular series, but obviously this came out and I thought, I'm going to skip this generation because I don't need to. And then everything happened. It's like...
Which one do you have, the 1080 Ti or the 1080?
Just a standard 1080. I bought it off my friend.
Still good.
He got 2080, and I mean that's the thing. It's absolutely fine. Like every game I play, I don't have any issue at all. I mean, Cyberpunk maybe give it a run for its money, but I've not got that game yet, so I've never come to that point. But we'll see. I mean, I am also looking to get some 1440p monitors, get a pair of them. But again, the price of monitors is daft as well. So
yeah. I have 1440p 60 hertz. I'm fine with that because I play single player games. It's fine. But I'm looking to buy a 4K monitor, a 32-inch, 31.5, and the small 1080p monitor as a second monitor. But 4K monitors are still more expensive than a TV. Like you can buy a pretty decent 4K TV, which is let's say 50-inch, 55-inch, maybe cheaper than a 31, 32-inch monitor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think. When we first bought our first 4K TV was about, I think we bought it for about £500, and like you say, you can probably get a decent one for maybe 250, 300. not like a sharp one or anything like that. But yeah, absolutely. In comparison to things like monitors, the monitor price is just daft. In fact, someone I worked with, what she'd bought her son a monitor. It was I think it was only a 1080p one, 1080p 60 FPS, just standard monitor. I think she paid something like 120 quid for it, and then a week later he wanted two of them. Same monitor was 250 quid within a week, just purely because of the supply and demand. It's crazy at the moment.
So that's true.
So like I said, so in terms of YouTube channels, the ones you recommend, you've got Daz Geek, you've got Mango Hood for your benchmarking. Is there anyone else you typically, apart from myself, of course, anyone else you typically watch on a daily basis or whenever they put on content?
Not really Linux. So Linux, I like for news, Joker Productions. So he does news mainly. So it can be Windows, it can be anything, to be honest. Hardware news. I watch Hardware Unbox, Tech Aesthetic. Tech Aesthetic, it's one of my favorite hardware-wise, because I said I used to build PCs. But Linux-wise, what I mentioned earlier, I don't want to be rude, but I think there is not many quality Linux gaming or Linux channels on YouTube. I know there is, how he called his channel, the Linux Gamer. He's good, but I just, to be honest, to be frank, I can be honest. I hope I don't like his style. I don't like his style, but it's there. He does good videos. If you don't mind his style, that's just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch some of his stuff before. In fact, he goes to a Garda Bryant now, which I think is actually his name. But I tend to find it's more of a drama site. So like, it'll cover something, it'll be some reaction to some drama that's occurred, and it's just not the kind of content for me. Clearly, obviously, people like that kind of thing.
I forgot to mention level 1, Wendell. So he's good. He's absolutely good. So he's very good. I don't know, you know him or not? Level 1 Tech.
No, I've heard of him. I've never really got around to watching any of his content though. You're the second person actually that's mentioned that. I think Matt, who did the first one with first podcast with, he mentioned to check him out as well. So and that was a week ago. So I feel kind of bad now. I should have really checked that out in the meantime. There's also Infinite Galactic. I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's good. I used to watch DistroTube. His videos are all the time the same. Like, okay, let's install the latest Manjaro, and he just opens the applications. Oh, it comes with Firefox, it comes with GIMP, it comes with, I don't know, this media player, and that's it. That's the whole distro review. So it's not really useful. Like, you just tell me what are the wallpapers. Oh, has light, has dark wallpapers, and that's that. You have a 8 minutes video, and you just call it a day, and you just did a distro review. That's not a distro review in my eyes. I don't do distro reviews. If someone would comment, okay, do a distro reviews, I don't do it. I could do it, but I think I'm not good at it, because I always modify my distros, whatever I use. I don't use the out of the box setup. And I would just complain, oh, I would do it differently, or I would change this in a config file. So it's just not for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also of the mentality that it's a bit of a meme at this point, but yeah, distribution personally to me doesn't really matter, because I mean, there's only really a couple of things that will differ. The first one is obviously your package manager, and I suppose you could argue your base. So, for example, when it comes down to something like Ubuntu versus Arches, I suppose release cycles as well. But to my knowledge, I don't think there's anything you can't do on Ubuntu that you can't do on Arch, and vice versa. There may be one or two things specifically written for that distribution that won't work, but on the whole, I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. It's just a matter of you just choosing something you're familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, I did how to set up Pop! OS for gaming. If you watch that video, then you know how to set up any Debian Ubuntu base. Like, Debian would be a bit more trickier, but Ubuntu base distro. And the same story, how to set up Manjaro for gaming. If you watch that, you know the rest of them.
So if you, I mean, let's just throw an example out here. If you had like a family relative that said, look, I want to try out Linux, what would you typically put on their machine? You know, have you got any preferences? Solus all the time. All right.
Yeah, actually, my parents, they are retired now, and they have an old AMD laptop. not even an SSD in it. I should buy an SSD and put it in the laptop. And I just installed Solus, Budgie. Not even Mate. Mate would be the lighter one. They have it like 4 years now. No phone calls, no weird text message. Okay, I can't open my emails. I can't do this, can't do that. Only once they called me like, son, I have photos on my phone. How can I copy to the laptop? I just told them, okay, plug in the laptop. It's an Android phone. Swipe down, select from charging only to storage, and there you go. You just copy and paste, and they use it. I show them how to update the laptop. I think Major is the same once a week. Usually it's Friday or Saturday. Solus Friday evenings around 7ish. I just show them how to install it, and they just use it. And that's what I recommend usually. If you're not gaming, you don't have any special requests, you just want to check your Facebook, check your emails, do some text editing. LibreOffice does the work 99% of the time. You don't need Word. Solus is fine. Linux Mint, of course, very popular. That works as well. My girlfriend actually has Linux Mint on her laptop. She doesn't complain. Sometimes she asks, okay, like, how do I do this and that? But nothing major.
Yes, I suppose you become the free technical support then. Yeah. I tend to be that in my family. Like I remember once my grandmother had, because she uses Windows. In fact, she rang me up earlier today, actually, saying that she's summing up for computer. It'd be something really trivial, but it's fine. I don't mind. I'm the golden grandson, apparently. But anyway, she once rung me up and said, "Oh, there's something wrong with my computer." So I got there, and sure enough, there was a big error message. It was about 21 characters. It's like, do you know what it means? I went, no, I don't have a clue. Whoa. Oh, well, I thought you knew about everything. I went, no, how the hell would I it's a mirror every possible error message? As it turned out, what she'd done is she'd gone to install Firefox, gone to some dodgy site which had bundled a load of adware with it.
Oh, yeah.
So I managed to remove it all. And I kid you not, just about to turn the computer off, a little thing pops down the bottom right-hand corner. It was like weather. It was something to do with weather. And I went, Grandma, what the hell is this? Went, I don't know. It came free with it. And I went, came free. Yeah, okay then. Which is actually why I recommend there's a website that I use called Ninite. I think you've used it before, where it's brilliant. You go to it, you can create your own little installer, choose all the applications you want to install, run that. You don't need to deal with toolbars, optional, optional crap that comes bundled or anything like that. It's a brilliant little piece of software. You've used that before then, Ninite?
Maybe once or twice. I had some issues when people back then when I was fixing Windows PCs. They were calling me, okay, it's not working. Okay, I have black screen. I have this and that, and I needed to. It's an old laptop. I need to hunt down an old Nvidia AMD driver, or they just install an application. And on Windows, you just double click on the exe file, and you can install it that way. I wouldn't recommend it. Next. Okay. Next. Finish, close, and that's it. And after you just realize, okay, you have another application installed, antivirus software, or a extra search bar with McAfee, for example. So
not that.
Oh yeah, Windows tend to do that. Like, oh, you accept this? Of course I accept it. And extra just meaning, okay, we're going to install an extra search bar or an extra something on your PC. So I don't like when someone calling me like, oh, I install this and that. Okay, why did you do that? But the website you mentioned, I don't really use it because I said I just have a script and I just run that one.
And no, it's for Windows.
Oh, it's Windows.
It is, yeah. If you go to, I think it's ninite.com, you basically have a checklist. So it's all like popular applications, and you download it. It's just installer, and so you run the installer.
Chocolate,
It's similar to Chocolate. Chocolate's more package manager based, isn't it? I was going to say, in fact, there is actually a package manager for Windows 10 called Winget. It's still in development, but it actually does exist. So I suspect that at one point, Windows is going to move away from that, and they're going to have their own repositories. But yeah, if you want to check that up, you can check that on GitHub. It runs on the latest version of Windows 10. It's called Winget. It's the Windows 10 package manager.
I might have a look.
Yeah, it's very basic at the moment. You can only really install and remove packages. I mean, they've only just added the option to remove packages. It used to be just install it. But yeah, I mean, I'll probably do a video on that once it becomes a bit more polished, because it's certainly something interesting. It's because it's all script based. So if you were in a scenario where you set up several computers at once, you could effectively just run a single script and just have everything set up across the network.
Yeah, true. But to be honest, I don't use Windows. I use Windows only when I do benchmark. I just completely switched over to Linux. So I don't know when was the last time I had to set up a PC with Windows and install and remove applications. And But I used to use Chocolatey. I think it's called Chocolatey, and that does the job.
Yeah, I mean, my actual professional work, I deal with Windows 10 every day. It's not like I have to. I actually deal with it. Yeah, so I'm always installing back Windows. So it's something that I use daily. But when I come home,
I use Windows as well in when I work, but we just use few applications on the Windows machines because that's what we have there. At home, I do everything on Linux: video editing, photo editing, recording, everything.
I tend to find that because for my edit side of things, I use Kden Live, and hardware acceleration actually works out the box on Kden Live if you install it on Linux. Doesn't matter what distribution it is, it works. But if you do the same thing on Windows, it doesn't. I don't know why it doesn't.
Yeah, it's true. But actually, we on an AMD card, AMF, as I said earlier, that doesn't work. So hardware acceleration, but it's very, very buggy. So some effects, they just don't work, or maybe on the timeline works. But when you render the video and you watch it back, and it's just glitchy. So I use my CPU, but I used to use DaVinci. So DaVinci Resolve, but DaVinci Resolve doesn't use the GPU either, just if you pay. Kden Live just added GPU support for all the GPUs. It has VAPI for Intel, AMD, and you have NVENC as well. And we don't have that, which would work fine, sadly. As I said, I go back and forth about the topic. The NVENC, that's what I miss. Like literally, that's what I really miss from an Nvidia card.
Mm-hmm. I mean, would you ever go back to Nvidia, or are you?
I would, like, if tomorrow I would find a deal, 3060 Ti, reasonable price, and I can sell my GPU, which is actually good for mining. I can sell it. I can sell it for 700-800 euros. Then I would buy it. Like, absolutely. Like, there's a no-brainer. Yeah, it's Nvidia. Who cares? I used to use it. I would just switch over, and I would use it.
I was going to say, I always say just use whatever's best for you. Don't ever let anyone turn around and say, no, you shouldn't use that, because that's an opinion. That's not a fact. And if you go off opinions, you're never going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I was thinking to sell my RX 5700 because miners, they pay mad amount of money for, like, I bought my one actually from UK, £280. That was 2019 summertime. Actually, it was a fair price. And now you can sell it for 700.
Okay. Well, I think this will probably bring an end to this podcast, but thank you very much for joining me today, Joe. And
thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And I suppose if anyone does want to feature on a future podcast, then by all means get in touch. Where's the best place to find you then, Joe? If anyone wants to get in touch with you.
I have an email address on my channel at the About page, which is bero.tech@gmail.com. You can send me an email. I'll see it. I will reply. Or just send a comment under one of my latest video. And I try to get Discord working as well, but lately just keep changing the link, so I update under my videos. So Discord also an option.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for listening, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.